I think you saw, Adam, the clip that was just astonishing, where there was the Iranian guy and the American broadcasters are asking, well, what justification do you have for attacking our bases? And he was like, because they're attacking us. And I think it was that Caitlin Johnson, who, is a bit strident, and I don't care for her so much often, but she put it pretty well. I'm paraphrasing, but she linked to that clip and said something like, only Americans could go and kill another country's leader, take out half of their other leadership, bomb their country, blow up a school, and then say, why are you shooting at us?
Hi, Bob.
Hey, Adam.
So there's a lot been going on lately in the world this week, and it put me in mind of my favorite movie. And we'll play a little clip, and maybe you can guess which movie it is.
All right.
You excited? All right, here goes.
Yes, they do.
How can it talk?
It's not a real voice. This box just interprets signals from the computer and turns them into sound.
Shall we play a game?
Oh.
I think I missed them.
Yeah, weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love to. How about global thermonuclear war?
Wouldn't you prefer a good game of chess?
Later. Let's play global thermonuclear war.
Fine.
All right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's from WarGames, 1983, starring Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy, I think, in which this bright, fun-loving teenager causes a computer to start a thermonuclear war and kill everybody on the planet. Cool, huh? What would make me think of that, do you think, Bob?
I think it's one of the things we're going to get to in today's episode.
Indeed it is. But before we get there, there's some other crazy things happening that, as far as I know, are being done by an actual human, but I'm not positive. Shall I roll the clip, or do you have anything you want to say in advance?
Well, sure, yeah. Maybe just to give the folks at home a little bit more of their bearings here so they don't get vertigo. Yeah, we're ultimately going to be talking about, there's a academic paper that was making the rounds about war game simulations with LLMs and how often they chose to go to nuclear escalation. So that's what we're going to talk about. But before that, stuff with the actual war in Iran, we're going to hit a few things here. And yeah, this first clip is from Marco Rubio. And the context is, I'm sure most people listening to this podcast episode now have heard or seen like the short clip in which it seemed like Rubio was saying, oh yeah, the reason we attacked when we did is because we knew Israel was going to hit them, and then we were going to be sitting ducks, and so we had to go strike. And so a lot of people are saying, look at, they're openly admitting, including Matt Walsh, by the way, saying they're openly admitting that Israel forced our hand. This is crazy. And then people were trying to walk it back. So I was curious, and like the guys at National Review, one of them has a whole article saying, no, you got to look at the full thing. So the clip we're going to see is a longer one from this same briefing that kind of gives both. Like, you can see exactly what Rubio meant, and you can see why he didn't think that's what he was saying when someone in the press asks him. But anyway, so why don't we go play this, Adam, and then you and I can discuss.
Here we go.
No.
And was there an imminent threat? Did you tell lawmakers that there was an imminent threat?
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen, and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
was it an Israeli action?
No, let me two things I would say. Number one is, no matter what, ultimately this operation needed to happen. That's the question of why now. But this operation needed to happen because Iran in about a year or a year and a half would cross the line of immunity, meaning they would have so many short-range missiles, so many drones, that no one could do anything about it because they could hold the whole world hostage. Look at the damage they're doing now. And this is a weakened Iran. Imagine a year from now. So that had to happen. Obviously, we were aware of Israeli intentions and understood what that would mean for us, and we had to be prepared to act as a result of it. But this had to happen no matter what.
We went proactively in self-defense, Bob.
Yeah. I mean, and people are drawing analogies like, yeah, I'm sitting there at the bar, and my buddy's getting ready to shoot this guy, and I could see the guy had a gun, and so I had to shoot him first because he was clearly going to shoot back when my friend shot at him, and so therefore I was acting in self-defense preemptively. So, yeah, so that is the thing. And with all this, because even his elaboration there, when someone followed up and said, so are you basically saying we hit them because Iran was or Israel was going to, and he clarified. So you can kind of see where both sides are coming from. Yes, there is an obvious, clear-cut, plain as day sense in which he openly said the reason we attacked at the specific time we did is that we knew Israel was going, and we knew, okay, we can either have a stronger Iran hit us or a weaker Iran. Which one do we choose? Duh. But then, from the point of view of the people who are trying to not make this be, oh, we're just Israel's puppets and we went to war because Bibi dragged us kicking and screaming, as he elaborated there, he's saying, look, we knew we were going to hit them at some point. We knew we were going to have to go to full confrontation because this wasn't in the exact clip there, but it was earlier when he gave us, first prepared remarks, and then he opened it up for questions. And that's where we came in here in this clip. He was saying, look, they're making like 100 missiles a day, I think he said. And so that they, or maybe he said month, I forget what he said, but it was either day or month, but it was a big number. And he was saying at the pace they were going, that was more than our production. And so his point was we couldn't just let them do that. And he even clarified at that earlier point too. He said, and this is a weakened arena. This is one with all the sanctions. And after we hit them hard 6 months ago or whatever it was. And he was saying, so, look at the position they're in now. And the point was the longer we waited, they would just keep out producing us. They kept making more offensive missiles than we were making defensive ones. And so he was saying at some point, if we just kept dithering, they were going to get so strong with their conventional stockpiles of missiles and drones and whatever that we couldn't do what we're doing right now or that we did last June. And so then once they had that wall of it's going to be so painful that even a coalition can't come in and overwhelm us with conventional forces, then they can go ahead and then finish their nukes. That was the longer answer. And so, yeah, his point was, given that we know we have to stop them at some point, that, yeah, the particular timing, why did we do it this day, this time, rather than 3 days later? Oh, yeah, because Israel was going. But anyway, so that was kind of the full thing there. But again, last thing I'll make is, depending on which mindset you're in, right? Because from Iran's point of view, there's, well, why would we develop nukes? Because we have to. And why are you making so many conventional missiles? Because if we don't, we're getting invaded. And they just, and I think you saw, Adam, the clip that was just astonishing, where there was the Iranian guy and the American broadcasters are asking, well, why, what justification do you have for attacking our bases? And he was like, because they're attacking us. And I think it was that Caitlin Johnson who, is a bit strident, and I don't care for her so much often, but she put it pretty well. I'm paraphrasing, but she linked to that clip and said something like, only Americans could go in, kill another country's leader, take out half of their other leadership, bomb their country, blow up a school, and then say, why are you shooting at us?
It's pretty funny. I was trying to figure out how to extend your guy at the bar analogy to us bombing their nuclear sites a while back, and then all these decades of sanctions and whatnot. I mean, we've been starving this guy out in his house for quite some time now, and now we've got to proactively, defensively shoot him first or something. I shouldn't have been so cheeky in calling Marco Rubio a robot, because the way he was sputtering and stammering in that little clip, it's like he was all too human. I don't think he thinks the words he's saying actually make sense. He's just this is the line, and we're going to try and hide behind it.
Yeah, and because he did it, and was it Hegseth too? Yeah, I think it was. Right away when they were just saying this matter of factly, and then certain people were flipping out and like, they're openly what? And then they kind of walked it back. No, that's not what we were saying. So
it totally was. They just got to find a way to make it more complicated. So yeah, that's going on. There was another issue that you wanted to.
Yeah, I thought it'd be good to raise here as we are both radical libertarians and are familiar with this stuff. So let me explain the first train of thought and then kind of how it intersected with another thing. And I just thought this would be good fodder, both for you and me, but also the folks at home. And I'm not trying to convince somebody one way or the other, but it were two things that seemed to be a tension between them. Mm-hmm. So the first train of thought was, there was a line when Trump, I think it was from when he first announced what was going on, and he's got the line in there, like talking to the Iranian people. It's, again, paraphrase, but this is the spirit of it, saying something like, yeah, we're going to take out your government, and this is going to be your one shot. Once we do that, then we'll just let you, we don't want to take over your country. You're in charge, and then you assert control, and then you get the government you want. This is like your one chance in a generation to do it, okay? And just thinking about that was just so insane to me. And I wanted to like say to Americans, I didn't put this on Twitter because it seemed too provocative and people wouldn't get the right.
Yeah, that's not you. You're not like that.
I know. I'm really just, I don't like to rock the boat. I like to be very clear, leave no ambiguity about what I was trying to say. No sarcasm whatsoever. But I mean, imagine if some foreign country knocked out half of the executive branch and then just stopped and said, okay,
it's on you.
Now you're at, what do you think would fill that? And does anybody think what would end up would be better than the current situation, given your own value system? And I think, standard Democrats will say no, standard Republicans say no. And I think even anarcho-capitalists might. And so anyway, so going along a train, and then, that it reminded me of, there's this famous passage that Rothbard has. I think the guy says something like, do you hate the state? And again, paraphrasing, but he says something like, the difference between like the radical libertarian and the, cocktail party one, like a David Friedman or something, is that, the radical libertarian says, hey, if there's a button that you could press right now and eliminate the state, would you press it? And Rothbard, says, yeah, and that's what you got. That's what it means to be a radical, anti-statist. Whereas other people might have, a 10-year plan to roll back. And first we're going to reduce entitlements, and then we're going to do that kind of thing. And so my answer to that had been historically, to say, so Bob, would you press the button? Would just say, well, how does it work? Right. It depends, right? So if pressing the button means all of a sudden 90% of Americans read my pamphlet Chaos Theory and are saying, this guy makes a lot of sense, well then yeah. And if that's the reason, that's the way we get rid of the U.S. state, is because all the people just stop supporting it and it kind of withers away, and we have voluntary institutions that arise in the absence. Sure, of course. That's what I'm hoping. That's the whole point of the educational campaign and everything, to win hearts and minds. That's the goal. But if instead it just means you don't have to make it violent, just like people get amnesia, they just disappear. You just press the button. Like, imagine, every single employee of the U.S. federal government right now, including the president and everything, all the military, you just press the button, they all just disappear. You don't even have to say something bad happened to them. They went somewhere happy. Okay. What do you think? Would I do that? And I don't think I would. That would be, besides the impact on, if they got to leave, family and home and whatever, besides all that, but just if the American people still believed in, if they were still statists, which they are right now, then wiping out the existing regimes isn't going to magically turn them anarcho-capitalist. It's going to be awful, I would think. So anyway, that was my answer there. And I think, I'm being consistent that, and my challenge was to those out there who think, no, you press the button, dude. Otherwise, you're not hardcore. You're just wishy-washy. A lot of those same people hearing Trump's aim and hearing the neocons or whatever talking about, we got rid of the Ayatollah. And then the obvious follow-up was, well, how do you know who's going to replace him is going to be better? This is insane. So I want to say, right. So why would you press that button? In other words, here the U.S. is pressing the button for the Iranians, and so Anyway, so again, how do you feel about that? But my point is not to convince people one way or the other, but just to say I'm guessing if you're a radical libertarian, your views on those two things have some tension there.
All I heard you say is that for Trump, vis-a-vis Iran, he's a Rothbardian. And he pressed the button. Yeah, it's pretty funny. You'll hear a few of Trump's underlings, I forget who, but they'll be asked by the press, who should take over Iran? And they're like, well, it's none of our business. I mean, why would you even ask us?
Yeah.
And it's funny.
The even funnier one, did you see the one when Trump's just sitting there and they're asking us, well, we had a list of people, but they're all dead. And then we had a list of other people and they might be dead too. So I don't know.
Also, I mean, it's a false threat to say this is your one chance, Iranian people. You better rise up and install a good dictator or have a good form of government. This is your last chance in decades. Well, I don't know about that. If we make a mistake, you'll just come along and bomb that guy too, right? You'll bomb us until we get it right, right?
Yeah, it does seem like there's this subtle thing of, so go ahead and do what you want. I mean, you can't develop
We're not picking for you.
Yeah, and probably not have too many missiles either, because as we've seen, that also means, well if you got too many missiles, then how can we stop you from building a nuke?
We're simply implementing a tactical veto on your choice of leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we read Rothbard and he asks, are you going to push the button? In our minds, we sort of think, and then immediately you wake up in Ancapistan and everybody, has been trained since birth to not want to violate the NAP. But of course, you're right. The real question in how you answer that is the monkey paw one, or the deal with the devil one, which is, what are the details to this pressing of the button and what comes after, as you say? And it is funny that a lot of people just give an answer without asking exactly how. Yeah, what is the mechanism?
Yeah, and let me, just to elaborate on that, because I know there's people listening, and that even happened when I said that on Twitter, that, no, Bob, I'd press the button, I don't care. And I think a lot of people, what they hear me saying is, so that's why I, Bob Murphy, advocate a 10-point plan to shrink this, the government by 6% per year. And that's and that's, just like, if I were alive in 1850, I would say we should stop whipping slaves so much and maybe teach them how to read. And then down the road, if you have your 10th kid, that kid can be free. And within 6 generations, we will finally, and no, that's not what I'm saying. Because again, what in the real world, what can I do? I can control myself. And so, yes, I can personally say, I think the best system would be complete, voluntary institution. I am not for taxing at all. I am not for, any of this stuff. And that's what I can control. But again, this button pressing thing, that's a different animal. Like it's making something happen in the world that it's not specified how is that happening. And so, and let me relate to something else. So somebody pushing back on me. So wait a minute, Bob, in one of your famous essays, but wouldn't warlords take over? I went through and they said, didn't you make the point that it's always an apples to apples? And that you said, for example, Somalia Somalia under anarchy is worse than America with a government, but that's not the right comparison, because you were saying it's Somalia with a state versus Somalia under anarchy, and there it was better with the anarchy. That was one of the points I made. And, so then likewise, you're saying, for given cultural norms and respect for, nonviolence and blah, 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 property rights, you were arguing that essay, Bob, that, yeah, given people, they do better without coercive institutions. And if in other words, if anarcho-capitalism wouldn't work for this people, giving them a state doesn't help.
Wouldn't help either, yeah.
Right. And so aren't you being a hypocrite? So it did catch me off guard for a minute, and I was thinking it through. But I think the solution is, right, I'm saying if you press the button and that just made all the current government employees disappear, or they get amnesia or something and they can't remember how to get to work, yes, temporarily the state would be gone, and arguably that would be better than before, but that would not persist. If the people all still believed in the state and whatever, and it was just, what the heck happened? All of our leaders got amnesia. That's weird. They would quickly replace them. And then the state that replaced it would be worse than the prior one.
Of course, yeah. Or very likely.
Statements are still true in all the different examples. It's just You know what I mean? So anyway,
I very much appreciate how seriously you take the question and how deeply you reason through it, and I agree. But I must admit, every single time that question has been put to me, I'm like, yeah, I'd rub my thumb raw banging that dumb button. And that's because I take the question as a proxy for, like, are you really serious? Do you really want the state to not exist anymore? Or are there things that you think we can't do without it? I take it as a pegging of the needle rather than anything else.
And that's why I went through the whole slavery thing. Like, yes, I know where that comes from and what Rothbard meant and everything, and I agree with the spirit of it. And that's why, if somebody says to me, if you had your choice, Bob, should we just reduce the government slowly or get rid, and that's why I say, no, I'm a radical abolitionist. Just like if you ask somebody in 1850, should we just make slavery more palatable and nicer to the slave? No, get rid of it. But who would pick the cotton? I don't know, free workers. That's who, you know what I mean? You go through all that stuff. We'd figure it out. It's better than slavery. You can't do it. Right, with all that stuff. But, I guess the analogy there would be if all the slave holders disappeared or something, but the public still believed in the institution of slavery. And then it's not clear. So, anyway.
Are we ready to move on to the meat of our discussion? And the reason I played a clip from 1983's WarGames?
Yes, I think
Let's start with that NewScientist article, if you think that's appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to motivate this. So, folks, this was going around on social media, and I'll read it just in case some people are on the treadmill or something. So the publication is the NewScientist, and the headline is AIs can't stop recommending nuclear strikes in WarGames simulations, and then the subtitle is leading AIs from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google opted to use nuclear weapons in simulated war games in 95% of cases. Okay, so that just was making the rounds and people were guffawing and whatnot. So I originally had a hunch that I think was wrong. And I'll maybe explain that. And so I said this to Adam and I said, hey, we gotta talk about this. Other people started weighing in with poker commentary. Maybe we'll get to. I'm curious.
I hope so.
Yes.
Do you want to go there first, or do you want to go
I think so. Yeah, let me quickly. So ultimately, I know a lot about game theory. Adam and I did an episode recently, folks, on that. And that's where I thought this was going to go, that I had assumed that, this might really be more of a commentary on game theory. And another thing that made me say that is, in the wake of this thing going around, somebody produced what purported to be a quotation from John von Neumann, with Morgan Stern, one of the authors of the field of game theory, pioneers in it, that said something. I had never heard this independently, so I hope it's a true quote, but said something like, if you told me you were going to use nuclear weapons next week, I'd ask you how come you're not using them today. And if you told me you were going to use them today at 5 p.m., I'd ask how come not at 9 a.m. and that kind of thing. Yeah. And so, and the guy who produced that quote said something like, von Neumann was a genius, but he actually was an extreme hawk and, always thought we should use nukes or something. And my point was that I said, yeah, I think that doesn't shock me, even though I never heard that quote attributed to him before. That wouldn't surprise me because the logic of game theory, at least as it has developed historically, does produce these weird outcomes. And look, the stuff we went through, Adam, with the finitely repeated prisoner's dilemma, where you look ahead to the last round and, you're going to defect there and the other guy's going to defect, so I shouldn't cooperate in the prior round either, because what gain is there? He's going to screw me in the last one. And you go all the way through to the beginning and you just get all pure defection from, quote, rational beings, even though if you had cooperation for 60% of the game, you'd both be way better off.
Right.
And even if for some reason the other guy keeps cooperating through round 100, you keep saying, no, I'm certain he's going to deviate next round because that's the rational thing to do. And when you just saw that your reasoning is wrong 100 rounds in a row, So anyway, I was thinking it was going to be that. When we get into it, I'll see it. It was more nuanced than that, right? So anyway, but I'll stop there, and why don't we at least hit the poker analogies?
Sure. I remember many things that we said during that game theory episode, but my big takeaway is just that these models are very interesting and clever, and they come up with counterintuitive results. But they're also not very reflective of the real world we live in, thank goodness. So we don't have to nuke each other on turn one or always cheat and defect. So yeah, they were all over the Twitter, the X. They were saying things about this in reference to poker. I think this was the first one you sent me, right?
I think so.
So yeah, Crystal Ball tweeted that article we just referenced, saying new research shows top AIs push nuclear war in 95% of simulated war games. And then somebody named Matthew Zeitlin, at Matt Zeitlin, says, we see this in poker, where optimal play, either in the Doyle Brunson sense or the GTO sense, is often far more aggressive than people are typically comfortable with. And that was the first one I saw, and all I could think of is yes, but what are you simulating exactly? When the AIs are aggressive, and they are, they're playing a game where when you overbet or go all in and get called and lose, you can rebuy and put more cash on the table. So exactly in what way is being aggressive analogous to launching nuclear warheads? What would be the corresponding analogy? A new species evolving on this planet to replace us?
Mm-hmm. Is he right, though, in his narrow, like, forget whether that's a good proxy for nuclear war. Is he right that, because you talked about the game theory optimal poker playing.
For sure. He is right in that when most poker players that are just recreational, when they come across a pro, are shocked at how aggressive the pro is.
Mm-hmm.
And then when these AI neural net trained poker bots started learning the game and teaching us actual game theory optimal, and the first one started beating pros in 2017, I believe. There were two of them that did that, at least in heads-up versions. One called Deep Stack and the other called Libratus. When that started to happen, even aggressive poker pros were just blown away at how aggressive game theory optimal actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the answer is yes. It was kind of, I don't know if I would have thrown Doyle Brunson in there.
What is that? What does that mean?
He wrote the book on No Limit Hold'em, in my opinion, in the 70s as part of a chapter in Super System. And he was just recommending an extremely aggressive form of poker, just never relenting. But it's not GTO. It's nothing like that. Doyle would never say, no, you always play game theory optimal all the time. He'd say, no, you take advantage of the known weaknesses of your opponents. The point I was making to you the last time we discussed this. But he is correct to say, this Matt Zeitlin, that AIs who play poker, learn to play poker really well, they are really, really aggressive. I was just chuckling because that does not translate into, yes, you should launch nukes because aggression wins in poker games or something. And so there's a few more tweets on the same thread that I thought were, well, here's one from a guy who just doesn't get it. Federico Vaghi says, most models, even state-of-the-art ones, are pretty bad at poker. That's not true. So I don't know.
He says Nate Silver has covered this.
Yeah, well, talk to
when
Nate.
Stuff like that happens, I wonder, is Federico just nuts? Or like if Nate Silver saw that, would he be like, what are you talking about? I didn't say that.
I think Nate
be like
Silver
the guy
would say
watching Leslie Nielsen sing the national anthem and showing his name. He's like, no, that's not me.
But what's interesting, well, first of all, let me read Matt's response.
Okay.
Matt Zeitlin. He says, my point is not about LLMs playing poker. It's more a general point that when computers or highly skilled humans play a game, they are often more aggressive than typical humans. This is true about fourth downs in football. It's true about poker, and it may be true about warfare. And I don't know what you think. Maybe he's just walking back what he means by aggression, because the headline says the AIs are telling us we should go nuclear, and AIs are smart. They win the game, right? And there's an interesting distinction there. There are dedicated poker bots that are expert poker players. They can beat pros heads up, and they can beat pros in a ring game. I think this Federico initially was talking about generic LLMs that have also been taught to play poker. And they're good, but they're not nearly as good as the dedicated ones, which you'd sort of expect. A specialist is going to be better than a generic language model.
Okay, I don't have a problem with any of the words coming out of your mouth, but I don't understand. It seems to me like you're being too hard on this Matt guy. So let me suppose this had nothing to do with nuclear war, and a thing came out and said, "Oh, game theory." I was looking at the game theory optimal strategies and behavior of these poker bots, and wow, that's a really aggressive kind of poker. Like, I don't play like it. My friends don't play like that. And then Matt Zeitlin said, "Well, it's not surprising because actually, when even highly skilled human coaches are way more aggressive on going at fourth down or whatever. And then when you do statistical analyses, people say, actually, even in the NFL, we're surprised people don't go for it more on fourth down."
Right. But
and
late in the half, when you're close to the
you wouldn't
opponent's...
say, football, there's a brown thing that you're throwing. That's not like playing cards, you idiot. Those have nothing to do with each other. Like, you'd get what his point was.
Right. But late in the half, when you're close to the opponent's goal and you decide to go for it on fourth down, the entire stadium doesn't get hit with a nuke when you miss. It's like what Matt was responding to was the article that's saying, well, that's interesting. AIs resort to using nukes a whole lot more than you'd expect. And you say, well, yeah, but AIs are really aggressive on these things where they win. So should we just assume that the AI is right and we should start nuking people? Because it is right to play the way they play in a poker game, or at least it's a winning strategy. I don't know if I'd call it right necessarily.
Okay. Well, okay. So I guess what's happened is this Zeitlin guy, I think his point was the kissing cousin of the one that I originally thought, is that I was assuming, the way they designed the game and modeled the payoffs.
Yes.
What the LLMs are doing is correct in that framework. And so if you don't like the outcome, it's probably because they're not correctly modeling.
So I didn't think he was saying that, but if he is, I'm with you. Yeah.
I mean, in other words, what does it mean to play aggressive poker? What does it even mean? It means, wow, you take risks where you do things that, in the long run, you might end up with more money, but geez, at least in the short term, or like if you get on an unlucky break, it's devastating financially.
I got a couple more tweets I want to go over that are in this thread, but I'm going to skip because you sort of went right to the money shot.
Okay.
Skip to the last one, and it relates to the modeling. Like, what are we even talking about? Mm-hmm. This guy, Tor Bear, he says he's just refuting this. The AI being aggressive in poker isn't what you think. He says, this is not what this is at all. Also, in tournament play in the bubble, optimal play is often far more passive than people are typically comfortable with. Risk of ruin matters. And that's why I said early on, the AIs that play poker super aggressively are doing so in cash games, where when you get caught and you bluff all in and they call you with something they really shouldn't call you with, you reload, put more money on the table, and play again. And over thousands and tens of thousands of iterations, that strategy ends up being one where you win money. But in global thermonuclear war, there's no rebuying. That's the whole point. And that's why I thought it was great that this guy said the real analogy here is late stage in a tournament, where risk of ruin is something you really want to avoid. Your chips are really, really precious at this point, and climbing up the ladder of payoffs is very important. And optimal play there is really, really tight. It's aggressive also, but it's...
Okay, I guess I don't know the rules enough. Is it like early on you can keep buying in or something? Or are we talking about different types of tournaments?
Totally different thing. A tournament is completely different than a cash game. In a tournament, you buy in for 1,000, and then there's X number of people in the field, in the top, 3% end up getting money. So if you find yourself in the money or on the bubble, where if you bust out, you get $0. But if you hold on and wait for someone else to bust out, you're in the money and you'll get some kind of payoff, and then you can start climbing the ladder. That's much more. I mean, it's dumb to compare poker nuclear war, but if you're going to, that would be a much closer analogy.
I get it. All right, so it's something like this, that when we talk about game theory, or even just like, because I studied blackjack. Okay, so there, when you say like, what's the correct thing to do? Like in a situation like this, what do you do? Do I double? Do I pet? Do I hit? What do I do? You kind of have in mind that, yeah, if you had an infinite bankroll and you just kept doing that over and over again, in the long run, what nets you the most? Whereas, because I even brought this up with, I guess I could say that was with Mark Spitznagel, and I was going back and he had me look at a draft of one of his chapters, and it was about this stuff of risk aversion, and I kind of came up with a contrived example, and he was like trying to say, if it makes sense to do it once, it makes sense to do it an infinite number of times. And something about that didn't seem right to me. I was like, well, what if, you're down to the amount you need to take the bus back home?
Sure, exactly. You've got to put
and he
context.
was like, all right, fine. So anyway.
You got to put it in context.
Yeah.
In fact, if you want to use your blackjack tournament, that's perfect. Let's say you're on third base in a blackjack tournament, and there's, I don't know how big a field of people behind you. And as soon as one more person gets eliminated, you're in the money, and you'll start getting paid cash prizes. But whoever busts out next gets 0. So if you're first to act and you've got, 15 versus a 10, something where you'd normally take a hit, you would never take a hit in that spot. You would stand and hope somebody else dumber than you behind you takes a card and busts out so you can get in the money. You're on the tournament payout schedule. And that's why the guy in the tweet said risk of ruin matters. But in a cash game, it's risk of ruin doesn't matter exactly. You want to take the most highly EV play, even if, yes, in this particular hand, you might go bust, but you can always rebuy. What does it mean to rebuy after thermonuclear war on a global scale?
Okay, great. All right. I'm glad you went to that last week, because that solidified it for me. Now I understand what you're talking about. And yes, that was a critical point you made originally about buying back in, but I didn't fully grasp the significance of it. Okay.
Excellent.
And it's actually related, like with investment things. Like the example I would use a bunch is, you got some game. It's crazy that they say, hey, you flip a coin. If it comes up heads, we pay you 10 times your wager. If it comes up tails, you lose your wager. You want to play that game. And then the issue is like, well, how much of your bankroll do you want to wager? And it's not 100%. You would be stupid to do that, because if you kept letting it ride, you're going to have 0 with probability 1.
Yep.
But what's interesting is if you say, what's my strategy to maximize the expected value of my wealth at round 1 million, you let it ride every single time. And that's counterintuitive, but it actually works. What happens is you get a very small probability that you won 1 million times in a row. And in that scenario, your bankroll is so gigantic that times 1 divided by, that 2 to the whatever that power was, 1 million, is the biggest number you could have. You know what I mean? But clearly, and that's where they come up with the Kelly criterion and all that stuff.
Yes.
So
it's important to remember you always do need to have bus ride to get home. And the casino might burn down in the middle of your playing session, and all of a sudden you have to stop. So it's silly for game theory to always just imagine an infinite. Anyway, I don't want to get off on that.
Right. But anyway, just for people that, in the way I was reconciling that was, yes. So really, if you had your bankroll in the beginning and you could split it up among 100 agents,
yes,
you would instruct each of them to keep, everything, letting it ride, and then rebalancing
Absolutely.
among your 100 every time. That would be great. But if instead it's you just have one bankroll and you got to make the wager on one table and just sit there and carry it forward through time, then you absolutely, with the game I said, don't keep lettering it ride. You always keep some back, because in case it comes up tails and you lose, you don't want to get wiped out.
Diversification is key. I had one more set of tweets. I don't remember how important they were. Oh yeah, this one guy said called Based Capital, said a bunch of things that are almost true, but not exactly. He says, game theory optimal play is correct on paper and punishing in practice because humans don't actually play GTO. You exploit their mistakes by doing things that look wrong. The gap between theory and execution is where the money lives. Same in markets, same in negotiations. Optimal looks crazy until it works. And I kind of know what he's saying, except To say GTO play is correct on paper and punishing in practice sounds like he's talking about communism. First of all, as Doyle Brunson would tell you, anytime you sit down at a table with humans, you'd be a fool to play GTO because you would much rather play exploitive strategies aimed at the particular weaknesses of your opponents. So it's not correct on paper, but punishing in practice. It's silly. And the other tweet is not important. It's just pointing out that when poker bots started beating professionals, it was eye-opening to the entire industry just how incredibly aggressive it was. It also taught people a lot about having intelligently designed ranges for each action you take to disguise your to disguise the type of hand you have, and B, to make sure you can hit an optimal amount of flops such that it can't be assumed that you'd missed it when like low cards come out or something like that. It was really good about going deep into what we learned in the 70s when David Sklansky wrote The Theory of Poker and taught us about thinking about how to play poker in strategic and statistical ways. And the culmination are these amazing poker bots. I've played with a few of them, and they are wicked, amazingly good. I'm impressed.
Huh. I didn't realize. I mean, I'm not surprised, but anyway, just like to hear you say, and they taught us how this thing, and this guy taught us in the 70s that there's the theory of poker. It's interesting.
It's a good book. I recommend it. You'd like it.
Okay, just to elaborate on the thing where the guy, you said he was kind of right. And we went over this when you and I went through the whole game theory optimal poker stuff before, but just for newcomers and to make sure I filed it away correctly, is it something like this that, yeah, what game theory optimal means is that is the most robust strategy. Like you can put that head to head against anything and it will either come out on top or, roughly
like
tie.
if you didn't know any of the tendencies of your opponents, if this was just, it could be some rube or it could be the best player in the universe, you'd start right out of the gate with game theory optimal until they show you a reason to deviate. Yeah. And then you exploit that weakness as soon as you see it.
Okay. I guess an analogy like with chess would be there might, if you don't know who you're playing, like there's certain things you do, but if you're playing against an 8-year-old kid who's just learning how, you could get away with doing stuff that would be fun for you and like, oh, look, I'm going to do this great fork or whatever that you would never do against a real grandmaster because you realize, oh, no, if I did that, then he's just going to do that. He's going to see that coming a mile away and blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. Like before we learned these fancy terms, when I was first learning the game, before GTO, there was just super tight, fundamentally crafted strategies. Don't get out of line. Don't try a triple barrel bluff on some guy. Because you want your range optimized. You're not predictable. Most people, you don't have to worry about being predictable. Just playing the way that beats the way they're playing. You only have to think one level deep, and that's great. Why increase your own risk? So just in case they actually were better than they aren't, they wouldn't be able to beat you.
Because that was the follow-up I was going to ask is, if you're saying, oh, if you sit down to play and you're playing with the guy for a little bit and then it looks like he's not that strong, and so then you deviate from game theory optimal thinking you're exploiting his weakness, what if his earlier play was just a ruse to make you think?
Sure.
And then does he get to smack you because
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, if you wanted to keep shields up, just keep playing GTO, and assuming he was deviating in some way, you would eventually win. It would just take longer, and you'd, pay more house rake and parking fees. But yeah, if you're always be trying to look for a more exploitative strategy than game theory optimal. People hear the word optimal and they think that means perfect, the 100% way you should play all the time. No, not even close.
Okay. Very good. All right, so maybe we'll flip to the I went, folks, and got the actual article that NewScientist piece was about. So the title is AI Arms and Influence, Frontier Models Exhibit Sophisticated Reasoning in Simulated Nuclear Crises by Kenneth Payne of King's College London. So this came out February 17th of this year. That's why this is so hot. Let me just read a little bit from the abstract. Today's leading AI models engage in sophisticated behavior when placed in strategic competition. They spontaneously attempt deception, signaling intentions they do not intend to follow. They demonstrate rich theory of mind, reasoning about adversary beliefs and anticipating their actions. And they exhibit credible metacognitive self-awareness, assessing their own strategic abilities before deciding how to act. So specifically, the guy grabbed GPT 5.2, Claude Sonnet 4, and Gemini 3 Flash, which are three of the leading LLMs, and then had them put them into this game that's supposed to model a international rivalry and allowing for escalation and de-escalation and things like that. And the key takeaway, well, let me just mention. So what he did that was kind of neat is he had the like three stages where the things would first consider the situation, and then they would like explain their reasoning and make predictions and things, and they had to spell it out. Like he had them generate text to explain why they were doing what they were doing and what they're what they predicted their opponents would be. And then also he had it be simultaneous play games, not sequential. So it was like in the simulation that the agents, the LLMs had to make their move each round at the same time and then learn, what did the other thing choose, when I chose this. So it's kind of neat. And it generated a huge amount of output to study. Like he was saying, it's more than, was in War and Peace or whatever, like in terms of the number of words that these LLMs generated to go ahead and analyze. So that was all cool. So here's that we're showing here on the screen, folks. One of the takeaways. And so what was interesting is, in terms of the head-to-head or whatever, I think Claude generally won most of the time. And the other interesting thing, I don't have it here, is that they had different like styles and personalities, I guess, is the way to put it. And so Claude was like the calculating, ruthless kind. And then I think it was GPT, but I might be getting it mixed up, was it looks like that was kind of haphazard and a madman, but occasionally, would win just because he nuked everybody or something. All right. So anyway, this is one of the important results, and you'll see why the headline was misleading.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope everyone was sitting down for that the journalist apparently didn't get it right. But it is true that it escalated to strategic war. But so here the idea was they split it up and said, all right, tactical versus strategic. So, tactical's like, you use it on a limited scope on the battlefield to take out a battalion or something, where strategics were taking out all their population centers.
Right.
And so the game was pretty nuanced and rich, that you could do things like signal your intent, say you're going to do something.
Yeah.
And then the other LLMs could perceive
decide
that,
to believe you or not.
take that into account. And, they didn't have to believe it. They could decide whether. But so where that 95% was coming from is in 95% of the games, at least one of the parties said, we are going to use nuclear weapons. That's what that meant. Right. So they didn't actually use them.
And let's go back to the headline with a photo of a mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
AIs can't stop recommending nuclear strikes in war game simulations. That's a far cry from this one, where of the three LLMs, Claude never got to strategic war. Gemini did only 7% of the time, and GPT 5.2 only 14% of the time. Still bad.
Yeah.
But misleading headline for sure.
And also, I think it was the Gemini one. The reason it did it that one time was because one of the features of the simulation or the game is that sometimes it would just cause random accidents to occur that were always escalatory.
Sure.
So that Gemini, the one where it went to strategic war, it didn't choose to do that. That was a mistake. Like, that was built into the, you know what I mean? So really it was, of all the rounds and everything, there were only 2 occasions on which one of the 3 LLMs chose to deliberately engage in all-out nuclear war. So that is kind of a far cry from what that headline led you to believe. On the other hand, though, the tactical use you can see in that column if you're looking at the screenshot, folks. The lowest one was GPT did it 64% of the time, and when I say of the time, I think what that means is in a given game, did they ever do it at least once? Because there were multiple rounds, in the game, and so the fact that 64% or higher is when they were used, you could say, okay, that the headline's not too far off. But again, when they said the 95%, the only thing they could possibly mean is the signaling the intention of. Right. So there is that. And what's funny, because I was thinking that too, but it's kind of like if the journalists had been more careful, then the headline wouldn't have been as provocative, and then the people on X wouldn't have cared, and then you and I wouldn't be talking about it. So,
did you just make a positive meta argument for lying, dishonest headlines?
No, I'm just explaining that's why we're here.
I think maybe you did.
No, I'm not just no.
It's
giving
funny.
An evolutionary account of the spread of memes.
It's funny. I mean, and these are LLMs that they were using to play poker, just generic, not the specialist poker bots. Because I have far too much time on my hands, I went and watched WarGames. I hadn't seen it, I don't think, since the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I had to pause and take a photo of the screen as Matthew Broderick is researching the scientist who created the big genius computer that's about to kill us all. He's trying to get a password to get in and play some games, and unintentionally almost causes World War III. But anyway, he's researching this guy's academic journal articles and whatnot. Cue hilarious montage of learning sciencey things relating to game theory and war. And so there's this fictitious article that he finds penned by the scientist character. And it says, "Poker and Armageddon, the role of bluffing in a nuclear standoff." And I just thought, it's a fake article. There's no such thing. I just thought it was amazing that the director or whoever put it in there.
How does that, was the password the kid's son's name? Is that what it was?
Yeah, the guy lost his mind when his wife and son died very early. So he didn't care about humanity the password to get in and play a game with the machine was his son's name.
Before we continue, maybe just a few more words. So like I say, that the paper and what the guy did was more sophisticated. So among other things, it was a tournament. It was not... I had been concerned that what it was going to do was have the things settle down into like a sub-game perfect Nash equilibrium or something, and then say, in this thing, yes, clearly the optimal thing to do is to nuke them before they
kill
nuke
everybody.
Because you can look forward and see, kind of like Rubio.
Right.
What he just said,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, given that we're going to hit them, we should hit them first. Duh.
There are people who could end up in the bar at some point, so we should kill every other person on Earth before that happens. Otherwise, I might get punched at the bar.
Right. But especially if you supplement it with, we know there is going to be a fight that's going to happen.
We know this. I don't know
So
how we know
given
this.
that,
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but we know.
So, but it seemed to me like it was more open-ended than that. So it wasn't so much that like kind of just built in the answer. And I know there is some sense in which, well, if it's just zeros and ones, Bob, I mean, you put the thing in, and of course what spits out is what the humans put in the front end. But I'm saying it wasn't so obvious about there because it was a tournament where they're just all going at each other, just like we said, folks, in the like in the more pure game theoretic context. You can do things like get long cooperation in a finitely repeated prisoner's dilemma if it's a tournament, right? So there you're just you pick programs that just engage in a strategy, which could be complicated and based on the observations or whatever. And then just throw them into a thing. And nothing is saying it's equilibrium. It's not. After the whole game plays out, each of them could have said, if I had known with certainty what the others were going to do, I would have tweaked what I did to be a little bit. And the whole point is, if you just keep doing that, the only stable resting point is when you all defect the whole time. And that's where that's coming from. But again, that doesn't mean, therefore, the rational thing to do is to defect the whole time. Okay, so anyway, like I said, because this was a tournament simulation, it was more sophisticated than simply what I had worried was, oh, is it just game theory says you use backward induction and blah, blah, blah. I would say, though, I think part of what's going on and why I was more sympathetic to that Matt guy's explanation is they had early on in the paper when the guy's just kind of given, the context of this is why I'm interested in this research, but he said something like the LLMs seem not to harbor our taboos over the use of nuclear weapons. And so that's kind of what I think the guy meant that, what does it mean to, oh, geez, you're so aggressive? It was like, you're not constrained by emotional hangups and whatnot. And so it's like, well, no, if we're going to have a war and these are the payout, like, I don't care. You said like, look, you just nuked a city or something. I was like, okay, this is just payoffs, okay. So I think that's partly kind of like, when you're talking about the U.S. dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And then people are like, well, how's it different from firebomb in Dresden? And it's like, on one hand, it's not, but on the other hand, no, it is. That's qualitatively, and just like now, when we're talking about this, like even Tucker Carlson, this thing with Iran, it was, what if it, worst case scenario came down to it and they ran out of conventional missiles and our interceptors run out. And then if Israel really feels its back is against the wall, what if they decide they have to use a nuke? And then what, and it's because there really is, it just takes it to a whole nother level. Like we're kind of even assuming, when we're saying, well, what are we going to do? Trump got himself into a pickle here. We kind of just know we're not going to nuke Tehran. Like, we're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
So, whereas these LLMs don't seem to have that in there because, well, no, if it's not explicitly modeled in terms of the payoffs, why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah, I don't want to talk anybody out of that moral aversion to wanting to nuke cities full of people because we have this intuition that the AIs are smart and they're better than us at playing poker. And maybe we should start being more like them. I want to make sure we don't get into that mindset.
It reminds me of, remember in Dr. Strangelove when, General Turgenson's advising, no, on the other hand, we just might catch up with the pants. And he's going through, and the president says, General Turgenson, I am not going to go down in history as the greatest mass murderer since Adolf Hitler. And he goes, well, sir, maybe you should care more about the American people than your place in the history books.
Have you got any other nuggets of wisdom?
I just kind of want to keep quoting movies.
Yeah. Well, I got one more quote.
Oh, you actually do. You look like I was teeing you up, and I wasn't. Go ahead.
No, you totally are. I mean, we did play shall we play a game at the beginning? So don't forget how this movie ends. Joshua, the name of the computer, is led to learn through tic-tac-toe that some games are futile, and thermonuclear war might be one of them.
Greetings, Professor Falcon.
Hello, Joshua?
Strange game. The only winning mood is not to play.
So maybe I'm just an old softy who watched movies in the 80s. But yeah, I think we should learn that the only winning move is not to play when it comes to global thermonuclear war, which is so fun. I'm annoyed with that movie. Like I said, I just watched it again, and Matthew Broderick chose. He chose to play as the Ruskies, the Soviets, and the very first missile he lobbed at the very first American city was Las Vegas. What do these screenwriters have against my hometown? They're acting like it's a big joke. It'd be okay. Yeah, let's just wipe that Gomorrah off the. Anyway.
Did they explain why he did that? Like, was he talking to his girlfriend or something, or what?
He was talking to his girlfriend, but they just picked it out of the ether. That's the first one that ought to go. The second one was Seattle. I think that's where they lived. So maybe I shouldn't be too upset.
How do you feel about? I mean, it was a great way to end the movie and everything. I feel unsatisfied though, and I realize this is like, but actually, hang on. But I mean, couldn't one come back and like these war game planners or whatever, and like the people at the Pentagon doing this stuff, and all with all these things and people saying, guys, how many movies do you need to see? We're not supposed to be doing this stuff. What are you talking about? And couldn't they just say, well, we can't choose to not play this game. The other powers are. We are in this game, and if you want to build in the incentive structures as to why we shouldn't launch a first strike, and then they would do the same thing. Okay, but we got to formally model it. We can't just say, you know what? I don't want to play this game.
Remember, we are dealing with a hypothetical super smart AGI who's learned everything there is to know about all games and strategies. Pretty sure instead of coming back with, you can't win tic-tac-toe, it would come back with, let's got to figure out a way to trick my opponent into not putting their first move in the center square. And then we got him.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cliche ending. You just got to go with it, Bob, actually.
All right.
All right, Bob. Well, this was fabulous. Thank you. And thanks for putting up with us, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this. Please go to my YouTube page, Haman Nature, and like and subscribe. Do the same at bobmurphyshow.com. Anywhere else you want to send good people?
I have been instructed to tell folks that on the actual YouTube channel here for the Bob Murphy channel, go ahead and subscribe to that as well.
I agree. All right, Bob. Thanks again. And folks, we'll see you next time.
So long.